Today I'm talking with Jeff Reed. Jeff runs thechurch.digital, a website that's full of tools that if you're interested in learning how to have an online church, you want to check out this website. Now, Jeff works with Stadia. Stadia is a church planting organization. They are doing some really cutting edge things. And so I'm really excited to learn about what Jeff has to say, especially in this time of COVID, and how the church is responding. I hope you enjoy it. Well, hey, Jeff, thanks so much for jumping on our podcast with us today. So glad to have you. You are a leader in the space of how to use digital to actually grow a church, disciple people inside of a church, and I'm really excited to kind of pick your brain today. So thanks.
Awesome. Thank you for the invite. It's great to be here.
Yeah. So we're kind of talking about all things digital speaking, when it comes to a church and church growth. And certainly, I think your world has been turned upside down a little bit the last few months. Tell me what you've been up to.
Yeah. So pre-COVID, actually going back 2018, I started a company called the Church.digital, helping churches try to figure out how to do this church online thing. God has always just had a passion in me to help churches figure out how to utilize technology. I was doing online small groups and online Bible studies all the way back in 2000 before we were even doing like webcams. It was all like text-based communication back then all around the world. And so I've always been that bleeding edge guy. And in about 2018, started this company, the Church.digital, blogging, podcasting, consulting. And we were okay. It wasn't crazy busy. But then, COVID hit. March, we saw our traffic on our website shoot up literally 1,000%. Wow. 5 times the average listeners to our podcast now. The previous, maybe a couple months, month previous to COVID, January 2020, I actually got hired by a company called Stadia Church Planting, who was passionate about this idea of planting a digital-only expression of church, which was hugely controversial pre-COVID. I've had pastors tell me, Jeff, you were actually sinning by taking people out of the bride of Christ, the church, by doing church online and by planting digital-only churches. That was pre-COVID. Of course, COVID, those pastors are now calling me up. Hey, Jeff, how quick can you help us stream? We got to get this going because, a lot of the theological concerns that we really have are really more of opinions when you really came down to it, at least in light of COVID. And so, yeah, it's been helping churches, and this is really the heart, existing churches, helping them figure out how to do ministry digitally. We've been doing physical ministry for a couple hundred years here in this country. We've got it down. We know how to utilize the building to the T. We've nailed the building. But there's this whole online scope. The majority of churches, man, we've been throwing crap against the wall for, I guess, 120, 130 days at this point. Not sure we really have it all figured out. I think we're putting too much stock in one thing, maybe not really evaluating enough of the other piece, but I'm sure we'll get into all that as the conversation goes. But it's been a lot of helping churches figure out how to do ministry effectively in this COVID season, but also coming out of this COVID season. What is ministry going to look like post-COVID?
I have the same kind of experience when I talk to churches. Back when this thing, mid-March, when it kind of broke, every church was going, uh-oh. And, one little virus caused every church to do a 180. And I think that caught a lot of churches and pastors off guard. Some were equipped for it. A lot of them were not. So they put their efforts into, and, thank goodness for companies like Facebook and YouTube, because without that, they would have been in deep trouble. But they were able to kind of spin and create at least an environment where they could do a church service. The question I think a lot of pastors are wrestling with is, first of all, when we can get back in person, whenever that's going to be, what does that look like for the online experience? How do we navigate doing both at a high level, in person and online? But then deeper than that, and this is where I think you as an expert, love your opinion on this. How does a church actually disciple their current congregation and outreach to people that are maybe far from God, unchurched people, but yet still have a desire to connect and still are seeking answers? And how does a church do effective online ministry?
Yeah, good, great questions right there. And once again, I'm the bleeding edge guy. Like, I'm the guy that says radical stuff that people are like, he did not just say that, and then they send hate mail to Jason Hamrock. So if you want to send, if you're really angry at what I'm about to say, please send it Jason's way. You can find me on social media, Dear Feds. You can tag me as well. But look, here's the core of it. The church really is not even using the strength of the internet. In the average church in this COVID is not utilizing its strengths of the internet well. Here, I like to tell this story. 1995, Billy Graham preached one sermon. It was bounced off of 30 satellites all over the world, translated in real time into multiple languages. One sermon from Billy Graham, 1995, was heard by 1 billion, that's billion people. One sermon in real time. That was 1995. That was 25 years ago. I was a college freshman, Texas Christian University. My now wife, then girlfriend, she was a high school senior in Miami, Florida. You know what the long distance rates were for me to call from Texas to Miami on a landline, not even a cell phone, but a landline? We were paying 35, 45 cents a minute. Now I'm able to jump on a Zoom call. I'm interacting with you, Jason. We're having this conversation face to face, and I guarantee you, neither of us are really paying 35 cents a minute for this phone call right now. So you see, 25 years ago, what Billy Graham figured out to do, by the way, huge technological vision that Billy had, was called reach. He's able to get his message heard, but it's a one-way communication. We've really been doing that 25 years, but even before that, television has been doing this one-way communication for a long time.
Yeah.
The strength of the internet is not one-way communication. Yes, it can do it cheaper. It can do it maybe a little more efficiently. Some people, like, we don't have to have the satellites that Billy had to do, but the strength is really in this two-way communication where we can dialogue, where we can engage with one another. And I tell this story of Billy to kind of segue to this, that as a church, we've really been killing ourselves in this COVID season to create content, to create services. And you know what? The first 3-4 weeks, I was on a church today. Hey, Jeff, you know what? March, man, we were getting 20, 30,000 IP addresses. We were skyrocketing. It was great. Easter hit kind of around April, May afterwards. That 20,000 dropped to 3. Largely because maybe there's some digital fatigue in that, but it's digital fatigue because it's just content. You see, in physical church, we know that the church is more than the 1 hour on Sunday. At least I hope we know that. You know, there's small groups, there's serving opportunities, there's getting people on mission, there's disciple making, discipleship, whatever that pathway looks like for your physical church. You're very intentional about what that looks like in physical space. A lot of churches today have not figured out, they've not gotten to the place of, how do I make that disciple maker? How do I do evangelism in this COVID season? And as a result of it, unfortunately, when I look around, I see a bunch of churches that instead of focused on the one, instead of, the parable of the 99 sheep where the shepherd leaves the 99 to go after the one, instead of being focused on the people who are far from God, we've really turned our services, which really isn't that good of an evangelical tool anyway online, we've really turned it to more of an inward focused, spend time, let's try to get the 99 engaged, let's try to do that. And as a result, our 99's disenfranchised because they don't have a purpose right now. And our one is actually not anywhere near the church because we haven't gone after them. We haven't helped our 99 find their ones in this process. So church, we're doing the wrong thing. By focusing so much on these services, we're actually trying to create content for people to keep them engaged. But content is not the thing that keeps anyone engaged. Content doesn't change lives. One-way communication does not impact people in 2020. Two-way communication does. And by forcing our services and putting all of that in an online environment, well, you talk to an online pastor, they'll tell you people connect to community far before they connect to Christ. And so it's within the community, it's within the relationships that we actually start to see life change happen. Let me ask you a question, Jason. I'm going to be completely stupid when I ask this, just for kicks, right? What's the last Netflix show that changed your life?
I
Hulu?
never had. I've
In
won that
anything?
in my life.
I mean, listen, I am Marvel Cinematic Universe. I'm a geek at that stuff, right? But it changed my life. No, it doesn't. Content doesn't change lives.
Entertaining.
Community does. And so as a result, we've been focusing and listen, I'll be honest, March 2020, I'm one of those guys. There's actually video of me with online conferences saying, create content 7 days a week. This is our chance. We can beat Netflix. And you
Right.
know what I found? Really, just to be completely truthful, it was just more noise. And the approach wasn't let's create that content 7 days a week, but let's teach our people to engage their circle of influence in a new way.
Mm.
You see, the thing with ones is we have, as a church, we have organizational, institutional ones that we can reach. And there's opportunities for our church to influence and grow that way. But you want to multiply, you want to grow exponentially, you start getting your 99 out there. Here's what I know. Twitter, and I've learned this. Twitter has their we're in this cancel culture, right?
Yeah.
Where at this point, organizations, it does not matter what you say. You can have the best intentions of the world, but the power is no longer in your voice.
Yep.
The power is in the voice of others and what they say about you.
Yep.
And so that can be used for negative in context of Twitter's cancel culture, excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
But it can also be used for good as we ask our people, we challenge our people to get out and influence their circle of influence and share with them about Christ.
Yeah. Yeah, you said something that really caused me to think, because a lot of things that we do at missional marketing, it's all about creating content because, let's just face it, churches have done a horrible job of getting their content online to be found in Google. But there's a shift, and something that we've always thought through is it's great to feed somebody if they're looking for any kind of felt need help. And it could be marriage support, addiction stuff, or it could be they're looking for forgiveness, faith related, all kinds of different felt needs. You have to first show up. And so that is kind of one-way communication, but it can't stop. If it stops there, it's dead. It has to turn into two-way conversations. So call to actions to engage with the church. But I really love what you said with the 99 going out. We have to feed, but we have to spark engagement back and forth. And I think that's where a true effective digital ministry can really gain some ground when it has that two-way communication. And seems like some churches, I feel like they are doing a decent job, at least trying to do this. But in my opinion, it's like online ministry isn't another ministry. To me, it's almost like it's another church. It's a church inside your church. It can't just be one little segment. Oh yeah, one guy that's overseeing that, we call that good. That person, that to me, it seems like just from this conversation I'm learning that's not enough. And churches have to think differently.
Yeah, so the typical model pre-COVID was you're hiring this online pastor and you're responsible for the online campus. And what that really meant pre-COVID was this. So you're responsible for everybody who lives 30 miles outside of our physical area. Anybody within the 30 physical miles, you don't touch that person because that person's responsibility is the physical building. No. Online is away, is outside. And so at pre-COVID, we were really trying to disciple and reach those people who were far away, leading the church probably further away than what they were really prepared to do. Mid-COVID, we really saw a lot of the digital pastors come into play, where it's, okay, now I am responsible for utilizing all of the church's website, digital communications, social media. I am pastoring and shepherding the church, our physical church, in an online environment. And so whatever the tools, whatever the methods. And so we saw a lot of these digital pastors honestly burn out in the first couple months at just the weight of hey, we're not just talking about a small number of people here. The entire church is really, they were carrying that weight. What does kids ministry look like? How can we reach students better? What are we going to do for some of our senior, our older congregations? How do we care for them in digital space? And many churches were really pouring all of this on one single guy, this digital pastor, who was basically frying himself out. And then the third model, and this is really where I feel like we're landing post COVID, as wherever we are now, whatever the next normal
Right.
is this idea of a digital champion. The digital champion is basically saying it's all of our responsibilities. Anybody who's on staff, even the church overall, digital is part of all of us. It's who we are. Any person has a physical as well as a digital footprint, whether they're on the other side of the planet or they're across the street from your main campus or your broadcast facility. They're a single mom who lives across the street from the church is going to benefit from an online small group. So don't put undue restraints on her by having her only be a physical church person if she desires to interact with that. But let's figure out how online can reach her as a single mom and can also be responsible for helping her disciple and grow her kids. And so it becomes a much more holistic view. Actually, what I've heard more recently is churches are starting to wrestle with this idea of digital almost in the same breath as local missions and global missions, where it's this idea that it's all encompassing, it's for everyone, it's not for a pocket. They're even budgeting and treating it kind of that way. I've seen a couple churches. It's intriguing to me just to see how churches are really wrestling with it. Okay, it's bigger than what we actually thought it was. Like, that's the lesson of this COVID season, is to really let it figure out how to let it grow, let it thrive, and not necessarily put the limitations on it that maybe we were wanting to do several months ago.
Well, it seems like just conversations I have, I'm sure you have the same conversations. It's kind of thrilling to hear churches talk about restructuring their budget to go a lot deeper into this thing called digital, which I think is a great thing because it's just causing them to think. I mean, we're talking sharp people leading churches. They're going to figure this out. And it's fun to hear at least churches that we're talking to that they're going, yeah, we need to reallocate. We need to think differently and think bigger and more strategic. So that's pretty exciting. You mentioned to me that there's some churches or maybe church plants that are just digital. They don't even have a physical space. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, so then and that's actually, this is why Stadia hired me back in January to be the organization to help Stadia become the organization that really plants this digital only model of church. Now, there are some of these that do exist now. DJ Soto leads a church in virtual reality. They actually have 3 or 4 what they would call church plants or churches at this time in virtual reality. All VR is their main platform. They do the time zones of North America, Europe, and then Asia Pacific. They're also, I think they're on VR Room, and they're trying to get on to Sony. So they're trying to get into multiple platforms. But at this point, they're reaching hundreds of people any given week in virtual reality. And by the way, what they're finding is like the people who are engaging. I think I heard 80 to 85% atheists or lost that are engaging in virtual reality. In other words, lost people are checking out church through the safeness of virtual reality because, hey, I don't like what you're doing. I can just turn off the headset and get back. So hugely evangelical services there. Jade Earhart's another guy. He's a video gamer. And so he's created this in Discord, which is like a gaming version of Slack or WhatsApp. But he's created this discipleship church, disciple making movement where they're going through, it's called E3's 4 Fields, 3/3, kind of their discipleship system, where he's training kids how to evangelize using video games. And literally they're playing these like massively long campaigns with like normal people, not Christians, and through these like 8-10 hour long games, witnessing, sharing Christ, bringing people to Christ while playing video games, and then introducing them into the Discord church called Love Clan, where they start to train them on what it means to be a Christian, what their story is in Christ, and then empowering them to go out and tell others. There's a kid, this is probably my favorite story, Daniel Aaron. Daniel Aaron is a college, probably freshman or sophomore at this point. So 19 or 20 years old. 8 years ago, he started a digital only church in a platform called Roblox. It's like a mix up of Lego and Minecraft.
Oh,
And essentially, 8 years ago, do bad math, he's 19 or 20 at this point. He built this thing. It kind of feels like Presbyterian. His dad's a Presbyterian pastor. He's connected with and influenced over 24,000 people that we know of utilizing this platform completely in virtual reality. And so with Stadia, it's our desire to help others plant more of these digital only churches. Look, is the digital only expression of church for everyone? No, not today.
right.
Tomorrow may be a different thing. Today, no, let's get the physical churches back going. Let's get teach them how to be phygital, PHYGITAL, combine the physical and digital together, utilize their strengths to do ministry. But there's enough people that would buy into that digital only model of church to make it worthwhile. And I think if you really live the biggest challenge to a digital only church, and I've heard it hundreds of times, Jeff, digital only, it's not biblical. The Bible calls us to gather together in person. Do not abandon gathering together. You're right. We do see those words. However, when you look at the digital communities where we are, we see them and they see themselves as gathering together. And so like this whole thing of we're not challenging banding and gathering together. We actually, when we look at scripture, look at Acts 2, look at Acts 8, you see the church spread out of Jerusalem into different areas with that. I believe COVID is doing an example of that, where it is splintering up our churches into smaller areas. And we're going to see more types of church grow out of this. A digital only expression of church, a church that meets the biblical functions as set out by Acts 2, Acts 8, and really allows us to do a different spin on church to reach a different type of person. Yeah, I think that's coming soon ironically to a church near you.
Yeah, and just because you're engaging somebody online for the very first time doesn't mean that's the final step. It might be where they come to Christ through that experience, and then maybe they find a local church to plug into. And I love this idea of a digital church, and who knows what God's going to do with it, right? That's like us saying we're going to limit what God's going to do through us to in this digital space. It's like he created this technology for a reason. And I think that if we put our best foot forward, we're going to probably fail 9 times, but it only takes that one time to figure out, oh, that's going to work. And if it goes and it reaches one person, that's what we should be doing. So it is really exciting. So tell me what kind of other things are you involved with helping churches? Give me some examples of what you're doing in this space and this time right now. Are you consulting with churches? Are you helping them spin up a digital platform or a digital ministry, or what's that look like?
Yeah, so the individual consulting, when COVID hit, all that kind of went by the wayside just because of demand. But in working with Stadia, we've really been working towards this idea of helping churches thrive, grow, and multiply. As I said earlier, phygitally, PHYGITALLY. Phygital is actually a business term, but it's coming from this idea of physical and digital working together. I buy a rake from Home Depot. I don't tell you if I bought it at homedepot.com. I don't tell you if I bought it from the Pinecrest Home Depot or the South Dade Home Depot down in Miami. I just say I bought it at Home Depot. The location is actually irrelevant. Similarly, when we sit down with churches, we give them the advice of physical is actually irrelevant. Digital is irrelevant as well. Those are not the end. Those are the means to get to the end. So we help churches figure out what their end game is, what their model is for church. Some have it figured out. Some think they have it figured out and they need to add to it. But it really comes down to helping churches figure out how they're going to multiply in the season and how physical ministry as well as digital ministry can work together to help them get to the place of where they're multiplying into others. And so there, we're leading some learning communities to that end. Right now, Stadia has taken about 70 different churches through this process. We're about halfway through, and it's going amazingly well. So much so, we're actually opening up a second learning community cohort and getting ready to spin that up. If you go to stadiachurchplanting.org/digital, PHYGITAL, you can get more information on there. I think it starts in August, so would love to have some conversations with you and get you introduced into those. But between the learning communities, which not only, the strength of the learning community isn't the content's solid. We're bringing in churches from like Saddleback and Church Home and Crossroads in Cincinnati, big churches, small churches, different paths to really help like the learning community understand and be inspired with some things. But the thing that I think sets these learning communities apart is we also provide coaching, accountability. We get you connected with other churches that are in a similar place as you are, and coaching to help you figure out what's best for your church. In this whole COVID season, there is no silver bullet. There's no secret sauce. There's no, conjure code. If you're like me, it's no up, down, A, B, select, start. That's not the code. You'll have to Google it to actually find what the code is. But there is no magic to this, right? You got to figure out what works for your church, what your church is trying to do, and then build the structure around it. And that's what we're doing really well with Stadia right now, is helping these churches figure out where their end game is and then build the physical and digital structure around it, so that they can grow and multiply in the season. So doing that, doing blogs, podcasts like crazy. Feels like every other week I'm asked to speak at an online conference from some new place. And it's lots of people asking questions. And the more that we're able to help in this season and help churches not only figure out the technology piece, but maybe some multiplication, the church will be better not only today, but it'll be better tomorrow as a result of it.
Oh, I completely agree. And I think it's probably pretty exciting, especially when you work with a church that they're all in and they understand that we're not going to get it on the first try, but we have to A/B test things, and it might take us a year, but eventually we're going to get there. And on the other side of that is going to be a lot of people getting to know who Jesus is and what he's done for them. And I love that you guys are leading the charge in this. And it's thrilling for a company like us because we get to serve a lot of churches in this space of using digital tools to engage people. So as people are searching or whatnot, they find a local church. But that's all relative now. I mean, you can use like the Google Ad Grant to reach people all over the country. But getting that next connection and that engagement, that's the key. And so that's stuff that you guys are working on. It's super exciting for us because we'd love to hear what's the end result of that. What's a typical game plan look like for a church where we could introduce that to our churches? They're probably overlapping with the churches you're working with, but it certainly is exciting for us because, man, that's our heartbeat as well. As we care about that lost one person. They're desperate. That mom across the street, she's single, she's got kids, she's at her wit's end, she needs help, she needs a community, and she hasn't found one. And yet, go online and you can find one, and it's right there at your fingertips. And so, for you guys to be kind of pioneering that is really exciting for us. So, thank you for that. Thank you
Awesome.
for the input. And for Stadia, just for stepping out and doing that. That's I'm really excited. So. You mentioned you've got you're working on this stuff. Is there a timeline for when you're going to have some of the testing done or the examinations of the research, or what does that look like?
For the digital only churches?
Yep.
Yeah. So we're hoping, like, we're aiming to launch digital only churches in 2020. We're actually finding that the digital only churches, the ones that are already going, when a physical church launches, you want to get all your I's and your T's crossed. You want to get everything perfect. You got to have this massive team together because you're going to invite a whole bunch of people in, and hopefully they stick. And that's how you grow a physical church. You've seen it time and time again. Um, and that we call that hardware mentality. It's kind of like the iPhone. An iPhone comes out once a year, and so Apple works on everything over the course of a year to get that iPhone perfect for the next release. And hopefully they make it on time, or like this year, it looks like they're going to be delayed. And so, but it'll come out eventually because, they'll get there.
Yep.
What's interesting, so that hardware thinking is kind of prevalent throughout the majority of churches today. When you look at digital only churches, they've actually been more like, hey, we're gonna launch as soon as possible, and we're gonna iterate. We're gonna come up with versions. We'll figure out the problems as we're going, but it's better to get started than kind of sit around and not do anything. So like they'll start with 3 people and then grow to 6 and then grow to 12 and grow to 15. Or they'll have, in the case of Jade Earhart, they'll have like 1,000 people that are in this community. And then he'll start to build his core team out of that community and then kind of disciple out of that. And so it's been much more of a, hey, we're going to experiment. We're going to explore. We're going to test this thing out. We're going to see if it works or if it doesn't. And we're going to learn lessons from that. And so even if you're a physical church, I think there's an option to think that way. Yeah, but for us, like we're starting our digital only cohorts in September. And so if churches are interested in that, if church planners are interested in that, you can go to stadiachurchplanting.org/digital on that one, DIGITAL. And then that'll get you connected into the cohort. Honestly, we're talking to planners literally around the world. Obviously a bunch here in America, but South Africa, I'm trying to think, Kenya, Indonesia, Philippines, Canada. It's been, and honestly, I hadn't anticipated that. I hadn't anticipated the guy in Philippines Googling plant a digital church, finding me, and then randomly calling me up and saying, hey, I want to plant a digital church, and you're the expert. So, and I'm like, I'm not the expert, bro. And he's like, Google yourself. You are the expert. Can you help me with that? So this is really where we are. It's helping, figuring out how to do this stuff in digital realm, and then figuring out how to replicate it, because in the end, we're looking to plant churches in this COVID season, especially where property costs are weird. Economy is going up and down. Churches, shoot, how many churches have lost their buildings due to schools or previous leases that didn't want to renew? I mean, I can think of several that I know of. Yep. Just off the top of my head. Having some different models of church in the coming seasons may actually be helpful for us as we're trying to figure out how to not only survive in the season, but really thrive. I had a pastor that really sums it up best. Jeff, we've paused ministry at our church for the past 3 months, and we can no longer pause. We've got to actually figure out how to do this. And so whether it's, a digital only plant, whether it's helping your church learn how to do things digitally, combining the physical and the digital, like that's the end game for Stadia for any church is really, don't feel like you have to pause ministry. There's ways to thrive in this season. It just may take some work on your side and some philosophical shifts to get there. But you can certainly pivot and be effective in ministry today.
Great advice. Well, thank you, man. That's so good. Thank you so much for sharing that. With a lot of churches that we work with, they're in that right now. So hopefully we can bring some more traffic your way of these ministries that are trying to figure it out. And that's just exciting for us. So I can't wait to connect with you again to hear about maybe on the other side of this on what's been happening and what you've learned. And so love to have you back on the podcast again so that we could go, whatever next version that is. And maybe at that point, we'll have a little bit of a better defined new normal for whatever it's going to be for the church. It's just be a crazy time.
Yeah. here's hoping. I mean, if we could at least see where we're going, right? But that's always the God thing. You don't get to see where you're going. You just got to take those steps of faith. Matthew 6:34. Don't worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow worry about itself. Let's just take care of where we are today. So, hey, there's a bunch of free resources online at thechurch.digital. There's tons of blogs and podcasts. So if you or your church is wrestling with, how to even get started, what questions to ask, how do I get started doing this church thing, this online church thing, this digital church thing, hit up thechurch.digital. There's plenty of resources there, as well as links to Facebook groups that I'm a part of, and a ton of things. But thechurch.digital, let that be really the place where you start in there, and then Stadia Church Planting as you are getting more serious about actually doing some of this stuff and are needing the help to turn the corner.
Right on. Well, thanks, Jeff. I appreciate your time. Super informative, and God's using you. So it's pretty cool to see what he's doing through you, and just it's exciting. I mean, it's obviously it's a silver lining thing. We don't want a huge disease that's taken the lives of many, many people, but at the same time, it's caused the church to have to shift and pivot, and that's a good thing, I think. So thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks for the invite.
All right. Talk to you soon.
Well, a special thank you to Jeff. Thank you for taking the time out to talk to us, Jeff. We appreciate it. We learned a thing or two, right, church? We learned that even though we were good at pivoting when COVID hit to be able to create content and get it out there, that one-way communication isn't effective, and it's not effective ministry. It's okay for a season, but you have to create channels to have two-way conversation, to have interactive type of conversations with people that are landing on your website. Now, we've been watching this at Missional Marketing. We have access to hundreds of churches, Google Analytics. We have watched that traffic increase, but we've also watched it go down in the last couple of months. And I think it's because of fatigue. So what we can learn from that is, let's make sure the content we are creating it actually does have a channel so that you can engage with the audience, that you can go back and forth and you're not just pushing stuff out to them because they are going to start to tune out. Second, though, is you've got all this amazing content. Let's utilize the tools that we have mastered at Missional Marketing to engage more people in this season when you can't meet in person, or even if you can meet in person, you're limited. You've got to keep growing your online traffic. And we have the tools. We actually do this for churches all over the country, and we help them understand how to structure their content to be found online. But then, as Jeff was saying, make sure you have those communication channels so that you can engage with people and disciple them. It really is about that one lost sheep. They matter. The 99 matter as well. But we've got to really focus on that one lost sheep. And Google is telling us, when you look at all the different searches out there that are happening, it's up and to the right when it comes to people searching for felt need type of issues. And so, church, we have our job to do. We know what we need to do. I'm really excited to hear what Jeff's going to be coming out with over the next several months and some of their strategies that they're implementing. It's going to be fun to learn, and I'll bring Jeff back into another podcast later on. But if you want to talk about how you can actually get started with online church and get started with creating content, reach out to us. Love to have a conversation. Certainly, we've put some of Jeff's resources on this blog post, and so hopefully you tune into that and learn more about thechurch.digital. It's a great group. They got some really cool things going. So until next time, take care and God bless.